Thrivers, welcome back to a new season of Thriving in Color. Music is all around us, whether we are listening to it at a party, as we drive, exercise, or even when sitting in a waiting room for an appointment. It sets the mood, shifts the energy, and low key decides whether a moment is forgettable or iconic. Today, we're talking with someone who doesn't just play music, she curates experiences through sound. Joining us is Keanna O'Quinn, founder and creative director of Sonic Sommelier, a luxury and sound curation company that's redefining how we experience live events and making every moment sound like it was meant to be remembered. As a trained vocalist and seasoned music director, Keanna has spent over a decade creating soul stirring performances. Her white glove service has been featured in the New York Times, Essence, Harper's Bazaar, and Brides. And she's produced luxury experiences for brands and icons like Netflix, Dior, Michael Jordan, and even the White House. Thrivers, if you're a creative looking to turn your passion into a premium brand, this is a conversation you don't want to miss. Welcome, Keanna. It's truly a pleasure having you on the show today.
Hi, Thrivers. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. So, before we get started, what first sparked your love for music and performing?
I'll be going back quite a bit. I was inspired by music at a really young age. My uncle was a Patti LaBelle fan. And
Okay.
whenever he would talk about Patti LaBelle and her performances, if he wasn't, showing us recordings on the TV over and over again, his face would just light up. There was something about her voice, her presence that just brought him so much joy. And his favorite song by her, at least at the time, was Somewhere Over the Rainbow, her rendition of the song. And one day I decided to steal one of his cassette tapes, go into the closet in my bedroom, turn it down really low because I didn't have headphones. And I just put my ear up to the radio speaker and I learned the song by heart. And I cornered him later that day and I said, Uncle Gary, I got a surprise for you. And he said, okay. I'm like, let's go in the back because it's going to be loud. And he's like, what are you talking about? And so we go into the back room and I decide to do the very last part of the song where she crescendos. It's the most memorable part of the song.
Yes.
And his mouth dropped. And he said, how did you learn the song? How did you learn how to do that? And I really didn't have any answers for him. My mind was focused more on bringing him joy, like in real life. He's always watched her performances on television or heard her recordings. And I was like, let me bring this to him and see if he'll experience the same level of joy. And he did. And that was all she wrote. From that point on, I was addicted to the idea of bringing joy to people through music.
Wow, that is an amazing story. I just could just imagine his face when he started singing. Oh my goodness.
Saying, because Patti does not play.
Right? So you have performed on global stages and directed music for high profile events. At what point did you realize you wanted to create something of your own?
Well, I was working at a really successful music company in New York for quite some time. And in addition to wearing a lot of different hats, I was also a singer. And we were performing for a high profile wedding rehearsal dinner, which usually happens the night before the actual wedding.
Right.
So for those of you who are familiar with, wedding weekends, the rehearsal dinner is usually it takes place right after the rehearsal of the wedding. And everyone's a bit more relaxed to a degree, but there are some people in attendance who didn't go to the rehearsal because they're not necessarily a part of the wedding party. A lot of times loved ones are flying in from all over the world. They've never met one another before. So it's kind of a pivotal moment in terms of people starting their live journey together as a couple. And I was performing with a live band, and the songs that the band leader was calling in the moment, I was cringing at every single song. When he called Living on a Prayer, I said, now, as much as I love Journey, this is not the moment. This music does not match this moment.
Right.
And the band, the musicians were incredible, all Berkeley trained, you know, conservatory trained. So it wasn't, there wasn't quality behind it, but I couldn't help but notice as I scanned the room that guests were moving closer to each other to be able to hear each other as they conversed. And so I'm like, okay, not only is this the wrong song, but it's also being played too loudly. And so the objective of connection is completely being missed. And so this isn't music anymore. This is just noise. How do I solve the problem of noise? And literally from the stage, I started to conceptualize a band concept called Honey and Vinyl. And yeah, that's how Honey and Vinyl was born. I wanted to resolve the problem of noise, and I wanted to bring music in a more intentional manner to gatherings.
That's beautiful. Wow. Now, for those who may be new to Sonic Sommelier, how do you explain what you do and how it differs from traditional music directors?
Well, so my brain just works a little bit different. When I walk into a room, whether it's a gathering, whether it's a retail store, whether it's a restaurant, immediately have you ever seen, is it Born Identity, where he has this, there's like a computer screen that pops up and he starts to do all this data. And that's how my brain works when I walk into a space. It's like, okay, this is working, this is flowing, this isn't flowing, this could be, you know, going more efficiently. And I just immediately start to solve what I consider to be, you know, flow issues. And a lot of times the thing that resonates with me first is the sound. Obviously, I'm a very visual person. Most of us are. But a lot of times the way that we respond to a space has to do with what we hear. Primitively, we are wired to feel safe when our environment sounds safe. And so there's a little trigger that goes off in my mind. And I realized that this was happening in the way that I worked. I decided, like, hey, what can I do to improve these spaces? And so I started to take into consideration the menu, the venue. You know, is it a spacious venue? Is it, you know, outdoors? Is it a cathedral? And then I started to think through the objective of an event. And, you know, are people here because they're going to be networking and engaging in conversation and making business connections? Or are they here more so to relax and to enjoy the food? Putting all of those things together and wanting people to feel comfortable in those environments just naturally is a priority for me. And it became the way that I designed, as opposed to approaching music from the perspective of just performing. I think that a lot of music companies think about the song or the artist or putting on a really, really great performance. Those are things that we take into consideration, but there's so many other things usually happening in a room when people are gathering. And my goal is to always take those things into consideration, similar to how a wine sommelier takes into consideration the terroir and the complexity of a wine and then pairs it with cuisine. I view music as a pairing. You know, what are the other elements that are working together in the room, and how can we use music to create more cohesion? And that's how I came up with the idea of Sonic Sommelier.
Wow, I love that. It's so intentional, and the way your mind works with everything. It's just, wow, I can only imagine how these events turn out.
It's a lot of fun, and it's a team effort. I mean, the planners and the other vendors, the catering team and the florists, it's a team effort, and we're just really pleased to always work with such talented partners.
Of course. Now, can you walk us through your creative process? How do you build a sound experience from the first conversation with the client to that final performance?
Well, so we work with clients, you know, from every walk of life, whether it's a couple that's getting married, whether it's someone who's celebrating an 80th birthday party, or if it's a brand that's putting on a launch for a new product. Typically, our discovery call consists of, I think, less about the songs, less about the music preferences. I focus more on creating an environment where movement is intentional. Every room, every gathering is a room full of nervous systems. And
Yeah.
so what we want to do is to create something that allows for a nervous system to feel safe enough to relax so people can show up as their best selves. And when people do that, memories are created, and music is accompanies and attunes to that objective.
Yes. Wow. I love that thought process behind everything. It really shows how you're really putting your all into it and thinking of every intricate part that plays in your events and how you're curating it. So I really love that process.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. It's intricate and it requires a lot of detail, attention to detail.
Hmm.
But again, we work with such great partners, and throughout the process, we have an opportunity to collaborate with the other partners that are playing such a major role in the event. And then we're able to create a story arc, similar to how in a film, a movie can be great, but it's usually better when there's a really, really cool soundtrack that goes along with it, right? It helps to tell the story. And so I view music as a supporting character to what's happening in the room. We help to guide the experience through sound.
Wow. So you have worked with major brands and cultural icons. What has it been like stepping into those rooms and owning your expertise?
I'll be honest and say that was a process. I believe that, occupying those spaces is both humbling and affirming. And it took some time for me to own my authority. I think that as a Black woman, we're conditioned to be seen and not heard,
Yeah.
to kind of water down our power, if you will. And
Mhm.
I think that I'm also a very statuesque woman. I stand 6 feet. And so I had to become okay with taking up space.
Mm.
And that was a process. But I find that I approach being in those spaces with iconic figures and notable brands. I approach it the same way that I do curating music experiences. Um,
Mhm.
there is music in the way that we speak, our tonality, in our silence, our ability to listen to others,
Yeah.
um, in how we show up, in our presence, in our posture. All of that is part of performance, if you will. And so I think that putting the music first, even in how I connect with other people, is
Mhm.
my way of managing comfortability and audacity and authenticity.
Wow, I love that.
Thank
Now,
you.
how do you balance creativity with running a business, especially in a luxury space?
Balance is not real in my mind. I think that's always such a trick question. And I don't know this for a fact, but I listen to a lot of podcasts and interviews, and
Mhm.
I find that I don't think people ask men that question very often. And it's not
Mhm.
a bad question, but I
Right.
think that it really points to the idea that women are expected to kind of figure out how to do it all. And
Mhm.
I've chosen a career where there's a lot on my shoulders. If one wrong note is played, or if the sound feeds back and there's that annoying high pitched noise, people are going to turn toward the stage and say, "What's going on?"
Right.
And I wear that burden proudly and with grace. But balancing, I think, really comes down to freedom. And
Mm.
am very intentional about weaving moments of freedom into my life. So I feel most free when I am resting in my girlhood. So I love to color, I love a good coloring book.
Yeah.
I love to go on walks. And often when I'm on walks in my neighborhood, I'll see, the beauty of nature, something that I had nothing to do with. And so I'm often taking photographs of the things that bring me awe. I
Mhm.
really find so much pleasure in finding awe in the simplest of things. It's so inspiring to me.
Yes.
And so a lot of my friends tease me on my personal Instagram. My friends say, you need to come out with a vertical series because your pictures are just insane. Having an eye for what's beautiful and being mindful about appreciating it is a favorite of mine. I like to sing, loudly and off key sometimes. Dancing in the mirror, the things that little girls do when they really don't care about who's listening, who's
Right.
watching. Those things make me feel free. And so at a moment's notice, every so often, I tap into that, despite what time of day it is, despite what might be on the schedule. I honor my commitments, but little Keanna, she has a place, and I make room for her every day.
As you should. I love that. Now, as we talk about these luxury spaces and being in them, and as a Black woman leading in these spaces, what challenges have you had to navigate, and how have you stayed grounded and confident through it all?
Well, my faith is what grounds me
Hmm.
in every situation. I think that coming from a large family, and I'm the second oldest, so always having a lot of responsibility and knowing again that I am able to shoulder what my responsibilities are.
Hmm.
Having practiced that throughout life, I think helps me to feel a bit more confident in my abilities. But the challenges that I've faced, I think, are similar to, really pretty much anyone who is a person of color or
Yeah.
a woman. There have been, racist and sexist challenges that I've had, but I'm really good. I'm good for a reframe. And so, music in general, across the board, whether it's major recording industry or music
Mhm.
for events, it's a white male dominated industry. And
Wow.
so there are not a lot of women, and there are not a lot of women of color who do what I do and
Right.
are in positions of leadership at that. And so a lot of the time I am really pulling on um, anything that I've read in communication books. I read a lot of, books about communication and
Hmm.
how to use influence in a positive manner as opposed to being, pushy. I think no matter what, a lot of times women in leadership are called bossy, and I'm okay with that. I have a job to do, and I have um, musicians to feed, and I have clients who are counting on me. So every so
Hmm.
do have to be a bit more um, forceful in my approach, but that's also not a bad thing.
Right.
So I think there's a lot that goes into affirming my decisions. I take the time to replay the day, oftentimes, to
Hmm.
reassess if I approach something from the right standpoint, if there was another perspective that I could have seen things from. I check in with my team often, to ensure that we're on the same page and
Hmm.
that they're getting what they need from me. And so um, I'm always doing a self inventory, I guess you could say. And I think that keeps me grounded. And so any challenges that I face, I see them as an opportunity to grow and to
Yeah.
learn. And I use them as a springboard to go to the next level.
Yes, I love that. It just shows that you love what you do and that you're confident in it. And whether those challenges come, you still know how to keep yourself grounded in the moment. And
Oh
that's
yeah,
such a beautiful thing.
they're gonna come. And
Yep.
if I were to go back to the idea of reframing, a lot of the challenges that I have faced really have shaped me into a better person,
Mhm.
someone, so that when another challenge comes, I'm able to pull on the experience and say, okay, this is what worked last time, this is what didn't work last time, how can I use this to my advantage, and how can I use this to my team's advantage? And that usually helps to power me forward even more. It propels me, again, like I said, to another level. So
Mhm.
sitting and ruminating on my challenges has never ever worked for me, ever. I've done it.
Now, you created something truly special. What is next for you and Sonic Som?
We have a lot of exciting things coming up. So our bread and butter is rooted in private events. Like you
Mhm.
said, we work in the luxury private sector and with
Right.
hotels, restaurants, and brands, and we have so much fun doing that. But I can't help but think that we can have more influence on the community in general
Mhm.
by curating events that people who aren't necessarily attending a private event can attend. And so we're working on some music experiences that will be
Mhm.
open to the public, namely seated dinners. We're going to start there. And we're going to do that through partnership with some really, really cool Los Angeles based restaurants. And we're
Okay.
starting with some Black owned restaurants. And we're very, very, very excited about that. So stay tuned. We're going to be announcing that on our social media and in our newsletter. So please subscribe to that.
Wow. Oh my goodness. I can't wait for
Yeah.
that to happen. Definitely keep us in the loop because I could just imagine the way people are going to take to that, the
Oh yeah,
way
there's
you
gonna be some
curate your
wine
time.
pairings, some food pairings. The
Yeah.
music is gonna be the centerpiece, but we're gonna tell a story through music and food. So stay tuned.
All right, you heard it, guys. So, you're a woman of many hats. You're a musician, creative director, entrepreneur, and an author. So, what inspired you to write your children's book, and what message did you hope readers would take away?
My children's book was a labor of love. It's something that
Mhm.
I have wanted to do for many years. And so I started it in 2019. I've always wanted to be an author. And I said to myself, I knew that it was something I was intimidated by because it was something I had
Mhm.
never done. And so I decided to approach it from in its simplest form. And so I said, well, what would be the simplest way for me to write a book? And the idea of a children's book came to me.
Mhm.
And so I knew that I wanted to write something that was inspirational. I have a niece named Janaya who is one of my biggest inspirations. She
Mhm.
has autism and she's largely nonverbal. And she's very, very sensitive to sound.
Mhm.
When we have family gatherings, oftentimes, as much as she tries to enjoy herself, there are moments, when if the family, erupts into an uproar of a laughter, she'll say too
Mhm.
loud. She'll cover her ears and say too loud, too loud. And I wanted to essentially create a world where I could be a voice for her. And so I wrote a book, and the main character is named after her, Janaya. And she is a little girl who is expressing her appreciation for all that she is. It's called I Love Me From My Head to My Feet. And each page reads like an affirmation. And
Mhm.
it was my little way of, mixing the medicine into the message, if you will, so that
Right.
when children are reading it, it's an early reader. So ages maybe, 3 to 6, lots
Mhm.
of sight words. And so each page reads, as an affirmation so that a child can celebrate every part of themselves with each page. So it's one of the things I'm most proud of, and I hope more than anything that Janaya is proud of me.
Wow, that is amazing. It's always those things that we're a little, should I dive into that? And then once you do, it creates
Yeah.
something beautiful.
And now I gotta go big. Now I actually have to write a,
Yes.
a big girl book. So that's my next feat.
Okay. So before we go, what advice do you have for other creators who want to turn their passion into a business?
That's a big question.
Mm,
I am not a I'm not a big I'm not big on giving advice, believe it or
mhm,
not. I think that we all need to find our own way. I think that the way that one person may have done something isn't necessarily the way that it is to be done. And I think a lot of
mm,
people get analysis paralysis, or find themselves discouraged if they don't necessarily have the resources or the degree or, the financial support or there. It's so easy when you are chasing your dreams to come up with excuses. And
mm,
so I think for me, it comes down to one word if I had to give advice, and that
mhm,
word would be jump.
mm. That's a lot. That says a lot in just that one word.
Just jump.
Definitely says a lot.
Yeah, yeah.
Sometimes you just got to do it.
Just gotta do it. You just have to do it. And you, like Oprah says, you have to do it afraid, and you figure it out along the way, honestly. And if you don't, you fail. And that is also a blessing because you get an
Mhm.
opportunity to learn. So um I feel like it's impossible to lose. It's impossible to lose. Just jump.
Wow, I love that. Keanna, it's been such a pleasure having you on the program. Guys, I said get your notes ready because so many gems were dropped today. And before we go, please let everyone know where they can find and connect with you.
Oh, we would love it if all of your listeners would follow us on Instagram at Sonic Sommelier. That's SONICSOMMELIER. You can also visit us at sonicsom.com where you can subscribe to our monthly newsletter.
All right, listeners, you heard it here first. And be sure to stay connected with Black PR Wire by following Black PR Wire on Facebook, Instagram, and X, and Black PR Wire Inc. on LinkedIn for the latest news and updates in the Black community. Thank you so much for tuning in to Black PR Wire's Thriving in Color podcast. I'm your host, Camry, and remember to keep thriving in color.